Look at that. There we go. Counting down to the big show.
Yeah, I'm going to keep that away from you for now.
You can do this. You can drive. Do you know how to do it?
Huh?
Make sure the mic is on the phone and not on the camera.
How do I do that?
Hi, everybody. This is the pre-show. If we had a Patreon or something, people would have to pay money to watch you and I sitting here not talking.
So you're supposed to be here, Mike, on phone?
Yeah.
All right.
Also, hilariously, my job is 6 inches taller. Chris is really, really tall.
Let's both go higher than Chris then.
Here we go. Cheers, Worcester. It's March the 6th, 2018, and this is 508, a show about Worcester. Today we're talking transit and licensing with vinyl aficionado and Central Massachusetts ACLU field coordinator Chris Robarge. Hi, Chris.
Hey guys, how are you today?
We're doing good. I'm Mike Benedetti, and this is Brendan Malikan.
Right. Mike, I think you misplaced a vowel when you were...
Which vowel?
I think it was a U you missed.
You are Chris Robarge.
You're rolling L on your ACLU.
ACLU. Brent crude oil is $66 a barrel, down 1% on the week, and Bitcoin is up 2% to $10,800. We are broadcasting on Worcester's Unity Radio, 0.0000001 gigawatts of power on 102.9 FM. We are cablecasting on WCCA TV 194 and podcasting at pieandcoffee.org. You can email us at pieandcoffee@gmail.com or call into the show at 508-471-5265. And a shout out to the mighty Hank Stoltz for engineering today's program. Brendan.
Yes.
What's the top story in Worcester this week?
Well, I had a suggestion for you. I think we need to start tracking the price of steel and aluminum.
Okay.
Now that
Seems timely, doesn't it?
We're going into tariff mode. I don't know that Brent crude is as relevant as it was once, maybe like 2 weeks ago when you started that experiment.
I like the phrase Brent crude way more than the phrase steel and aluminum, though. It has
Mike,
we already have a phone. We already have a phone call. Hello, caller.
This came.
That's a really great point, caller. So we've had a request to talk about this week's City Council agenda. We will talk about this week's City Council agenda. Also, I kind of want to talk about pedestrian traffic fatalities and transit, maybe occupational licensing, probably physical vinyl records.
You're really in a good mood today.
Oh, I'm in a great mood today. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well.
It's been a while. I mean, we haven't done a lot of shows the last few years, but it's been a few years since you were on this show, so it's great to have you back.
It has, thank you. I've been missing it, and I've been missing the show in general, so I'm really happy you guys are back.
I think Worcester Radio has been missing your amazing bass voice.
Thank you very much.
I fake it. My normal voice is like about 3 octaves higher than this. Do you guys have a vote on what we're going to talk about first?
No, just dive right in. You get an agenda.
That caller, well, yeah, I'll take the caller suggestion and talk about this week's Worcester City Council agenda. This week, under the topic of making streets public, the council will vote to make a bunch of streets near Assumption College public streets. These are Knapp Avenue, Myrick Avenue, Pelican Avenue, Phoebe Way, and Toronita Avenue. I think maybe some of these part of them are already public, but this week is the big week that they're all going to become officially voted to become public streets.
It's exciting. Good luck, City Council.
It is. First, this is one of these things that I'm really interested, or at least love tracking, is just sort of as streets become privatized, and privatized is the wrong word, private and public. Here's an item: removing tax breaks for wage violations. Councilor Bergman wants to know if the city can deny or terminate tax break agreements for developments when employee wage violations are present. Do you know anything about this?
Nothing beyond the summary.
Do you know anything about this, Chris?
No, I don't know too much about the genesis of what brought this to the floor. I'd be interested to know.
And Patrick, I was actually reading right before I came down, actually, that This Week in Worcester wrote a little summary about it.
It was a good summary.
It was a little bit more in depth than the summary that the council has on their own agenda, but not too much more. But it just seems as though Mo is concerned that if we're going to be handing out a lot of tax breaks to large corporations, that there's at least some follow-up in making sure that they are sticking to the letter of the
Yes.
law on the back nine when it comes to business practice.
Well, I literally have never read one of these TIFs, and probably I should, because I would have assumed that there would be all kinds of stuff in there about, like, you agree that you will follow the law.
You think there might be a rider somewhere in there?
Right, like
Seems
if,
important.
if you turn your, if you turn your, I don't even know what, if you turn your thing into some sort of illegal nuclear waste dump, like your tax
Yeah.
break would go away. Do we need to, but maybe we need to explicitly say this? I don't know.
You should have put it in writing if you wanted us to pay our workers.
Was
I actually
145 front, was that a TIF project?
145. Which one is that?
That's the new big residential construction across from the
No,
new
the
parking
Roseland
lot.
project. Yeah, I have
Yeah,
no idea.
yeah, I don't either. I know that there were some issues there that the carpenters had been, the carpenters union and some other folks had been running
Yes.
a long running protest or picket. I have no idea if it's related though.
There was across on the other side as well too, on Franklin at some point.
Yeah.
But the like you just made me think of something that could be fun.
Great.
Hank, in the future, if you ever find like an hour, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's nothing to broadcast. I say we find Mike a copy of the TIF, and he can come in for an hour and just read
I would
it.
100% do that.
Riveting.
Yeah,
Riveting.
just read the TIF. I mean, nobody's awake anyways, but Mike's never read one. I'm sure nobody else has either. Like, what's
I
better?
would love to read that. I love to read written things on the radio. It's really fun. Here's the next item, nationally legalized weed. Last week there were a bunch of items on the city council agenda about restricting marijuana retailers in the city, including a proposal from Councilor Miro Carlson that there could be only 3 weed stores in each council district. This week, Councilor Lukes wants the council to vote on whether they want our U.S. congressmen and senators to remove marijuana as a controlled substance from the U.S. code. This is one of these items which is not,
It's a trap.
this,
That's my best.
this-
I'm sorry, Chris. You get a better voice for Admiral Akbar. Can you just say it's a trap?
It's a trap.
Yeah, thank you.
This is one
That's
of these,
exactly what it is.
This is one of these great items, where it's like, it's going, I cannot imagine it being even slightly consequential. I just appreciate that Connie has an item on the agenda, which at least to those of us who follow this stuff, looks like she's saying, oh, like you guys really, you're like so excited about weed coming into the city. Why don't you just like we'll have a vote where you get to say that. And like, let's see who's the tough guy then.
Yeah.
It's really funny because it is totally a trap, and Connie, I love her for these. She's really kind of brilliant. She does these every so often, and another thing that council is sort of known for is not wanting to vote on things that are quote unquote outside of their purview.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a brilliant trap. It's like, do you want to vote for this thing and direct someone out of our purview, or do you want to vote against it and vote against weed, and then you're also trapped? So it's brilliant. Cheers, Connie.
Is this, I mean, do you think that this is going to be the kind of thing isn't this the kind of thing where the mayor can just say, let's table that for now, and then that's the end of the conversation, and then it never goes anywhere after that, and there's no drama?
There's always going to be drama. There's weed involved. How can we not have drama in the Worcester City Council?
I'm just wondering, I mean, this is always my read on these agendas, is that it's very hard to make it's very hard to make a big deal about something if you're the only one who wants to do it and you're not the chair.
But that's what's going on here, right? And it's going to be 10 years from now, right? And everybody in the city of Worcester is going to be completely have forgotten about that time. Remember that time, like, when weed was illegal? Nobody will ever remember that. But they'll still be debating how many weed shops can be in a given district. Like, right now, today, 3 sounds like a good number. You know why? Because it's 3 more that are in a district right now.
Mm-hmm.
10 years from now, we're probably going to be looking back and saying, well, why are there only 3 weed? There's like 14 liquor stores in every district. How come there's only 3 weed stores? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We're going to look back on it, and they'll still be debating the stuff that nobody else cares about.
I think weed is going to be so potent 20 years from now that there's only going to need to be 3 weed stores. You're just going to buy like a joint a month, and that's going to tide you over for the whole month.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's whatever.
This is my theory. Dog licensing is almost as good as weed licensing. In 2010, the city began issuing lifetime dog licenses. Do either of you own a dog?
Yes.
I do.
Is your dog
The real
realizing
question is,
that
why don't you own a dog?
I have a dog in my household that's not mine, so I get all the benefits and none of the negatives.
All right.
Is realizing that you may be perjuring yourself or whatever, you may be violating some sort of federal law by telling the truth or lying here. Is your dog licensed, Brendan?
Yes.
Christopher?
My dog is in full legal standing with the city of Worcester.
All right, whatever that means. So you're aware that there's a lifetime dog license?
I'm very aware of this,
I had no
actually.
idea.
And I'm only aware of this because my dog popped all of his things off his collar, and I had to go get a new one. And so, yeah, you have a lifetime license number that's assigned to you. You have to renew the payment every year, just like you used to.
Yeah.
Now the difference seems to be, to me, that your little tag will get beat up or lost, and then you have to pay to replace it. Which, I mean, it's like a couple dollars.
Well,
It's
that
not
was
much, but-
that was the difference, but there's going to be a new difference if the city council has their way as of this
Really?
proposal. Because now that dogs are allowed in some city parks, the city clerk would like to go back to annually licensing dogs and to have dog tags that are a different color and I think also a different number every year, so that enforcement officers can more easily check which dogs are currently licensed.
You know, I'm a frequent visitor to our local dog parks.
Yes.
I've never seen a dog enforcement officer. Maybe it's just because I go on the weekends.
They're usually undercover. That's part of it. They take it very seriously.
Yeah, well, you know, I think they should recommend hats then. Small, different colored hats.
Sweaters, different dog sweater every year.
I don't know if anyone. So, you know, this is one of those things. You know what? The license commission, when they go to
Yeah.
issue a license for a bar, usually they'll take a tour of the venue before they issue that license to make sure they've got a good visual
Okay.
idea. I would like to suggest that maybe the Worcester City Council actually show up at one of our dog parks together. Wear suits. Wear your nicest suits. 10:30, between 10:30 and noon on a Saturday, a nice warm day. And then tell me how many different colored dog tags you can, or even the color of dogs that you can track at any moment in time. It's utter chaos. The idea that like doesn't make any sense at all.
But this does sort of make it easier though, wouldn't it? Just to be like every dog should have an orange tag because it's 2018. So you're just looking at the dogs, and if you see a dog who's got a yellow tag or no tag, no flash of orange, you go up to that person and you're like, listen.
Yeah, I guess that's my question with this on the enforcement end is what would you do in that situation? Because there is no enforcement mechanism.
Clearly,
Do
you
you
tase
call
the
the
dog and
police?
follow
Yeah.
the enforcement.
Do you citizen arrest the dog? I mean, my dog is a pretty dapper dude, and I'm sure he would be fully in favor of having fresh new tags every year because he's a pretty dapper guy. But yeah, I'm not really sure where that gets us.
Can I tell you the trick on tagging? And look, if your dog does lose the tags, right? Have you had to get a replacement?
Yes.
Yeah. So they hand stamp them, Mike. So you get these super cool tags where it's like they have like a die set and then they smash it with a hammer.
This is
And
like an
they-
artisanal tag.
It totally is. It's basically like you're hand carving your own dog tag. I mean, if you really want a really cool one-of-a-kind dog tag in the city of Worcester, you're going to lose your original one and pay $3 for the second one.
True story. It's the nicest thing I've ever gotten from the city for $3.
That's pretty good. Well, I'm glad to hear the dog tags are good. Maybe we should have an annual one just so that like styles can change, different ideas people come up with. Mascots. We should get a city mascot every year and put him on the dog tag.
They actually used to do that. And they'd go from like a dog bone to like a circle, and like every year I think they were, they did this strict annual licensing.
Yeah.
It was a different
Yeah,
shape.
they were
It
actually
was a different shape,
shapes.
a different color. And of course, those were all memorized by local police officers. So they know that, okay, there's a red dog bone. That means it was issued in February of 2016.
Yeah.
But clearly this person's on a date, tased the dog.
This is where I wonder, yeah, again, like I wonder what the dog park angle on this is, because it seems like this is the kind of thing which would only normally become a problem if, like, I don't know, you're like publicly intoxicated and walking your dog and causing problems, and someone calls the police, and the police is like, you're publicly intoxicating, plus you have a dog violation. While I'm here, you have a dog violation. Or if the code people have to come through your building to deal with some issue, and they're like, oh, and all these dogs are unlicensed. That otherwise, nobody's ever just walking around thinking like, my priority right now is to make sure these dogs. Although, I mean, the thing is, the different colored dog tags make that possible, right? That you can say like, a cop is going to go to the dog park for 30 minutes and just do a quick visual check, which is something that I guess you could not do now because the dog tag is forever.
And the result of that is you gain, what, $12 in revenue in exchange for $80 in time of an employee. Right?
I don't even
It just doesn't
understand.
make any
I don't
sense.
understand why the dogs are licensed to begin with.
The
That's
dogs are
because-
policing themselves, Mike.
That's because I'm a proud libertarian. Brendan, this last item is an item which I'm excited because this is an item which was on last week's agenda, which was held over so that it's on this week's agenda. Stop making your own driveway.
Yes.
Brendan,
So happy
stop
to-
making your own driveway. In an item held over from last week, Councilor Rosen wants people to stop making DIY driveways that take away curb parking and encourage people to drive back and forth over the curb in front of their house.
But we have some clarity on this now too, because the city, I mentioned last week when we were talking
There's a
about
bunch of
how
people on
absurd
June Street doing this. Is this the clarity?
Well, no, that was what one caller,
That was
who will
what
not
one
be
guy
named,
told us.
claimed that this is rampant on June Street. But
As a resident of June Street, I can confirm
It
that
is
it does seem
rampant?
to be rampant. Isn't a word that I would use. Common.
I would just like to say, since I heard the Rosen, the Economy when Rosen
Yeah.
show the next day, in which Gary Rosen was beside himself over your lack of understanding, Mike, on this issue.
I'm with him.
he
I'm
was
with him, 100%.
very very upset about this, and he wanted you to clearly understand. Now, he promised that he was going to call in today, and yet here he is missing his big chance. So
Councilor Rosen, where are you?
I
Are
have
you
to-
a coward? Is that what's happening here?
I have to fill in just for a moment. So what he says is that people are actually really are making their own driveways, and this is leading to, and you had kind of brought this up last week, this is leading to where you could have these neighbor versus neighbor clashes, and it is much more of a problem than he felt that Mike Benedetti was making
Mike
it out to
clearly
be.
doesn't appreciate,
I just want Brendan to stop making his own driveway.
No, what was great though? We were joking about this last week, where I was saying I've actually been wanting to do this because I have a shared driveway at my house, and it's just one of those things that we don't have any plans on moving. But if I'm going to go sell my house, like it's a problem to have any sort of shared property utility with a neighbor. So I'd love to break mine out, have a nice like curve that comes into my front yard and then exits like a normal driveway does. One person's driveway. I had the hardest time figuring out, like even calling the city a couple times a few years back as to what that process was. I think I pointed this out to you yesterday, Mike, as a byproduct of the city updating its website. If you search driveways in the city now, Hank, like the first thing that pops up in Google is the permit for getting your own driveway permit.
A legitimate driveway.
Right. Well, Gary actually said that there were individuals who they make their own driveway, and then somebody else comes along and parks on the street. They're actually parking legally.
Right.
Then you have these clashes where you've now blocked in somebody who has made their own driveway.
Right.
No, and it makes perfect sense in that capacity. And what the crazy thing was, the permit for a curb cut is $1.65. It's probably one of the most reasonably priced municipal permits that you could possibly. And of course, you get to do that for a contractor because you got all the dig safe stuff.
Right.
But it's $165 to be able to decide where your sidewalk ends. I mean, you know how much time Shel Silverstein put into figuring out where the sidewalk ends?
And he didn't even have a permit.
He didn't have a permit for that.
Are we ready to go to a commercial break? Ladies and gentlemen, this is 508. We will continue after these important messages.
I did think that was great, though, that Gary spent a good 20 minutes and then he was ranting about, and he writes these elaborate things, which apparently, obviously, Gary writes, and he goes, and in this one, he's writing all of this information, but it's wrong. It's like, wow, we're kind of getting in the weeds on this one.
I want to hear him. I feel like I'm defending him 100% of this item. I want to hear what his complaint is about this. It's so funny. I listened to the show today some because I was like, it's back on the agenda. Is he going to talk about it on today's show? And
what he'll do is he'll listen to you because he listens a lot in the afternoon because we play the whole thing back.
Right.
So he'll listen to you now, and then tomorrow he will respond to this.
Sorry, so we're listening to tomorrow's show. We should start a feud between us. Even though
You know what?
That would be help our
perfect.
ratings.
It would be great.
Betty Rosen blood feud.
An interstation feud between. At any moment, Gary could come bursting out of that closet like a Kool-Aid man and just come lunging for you.
Yeah, it's such a crazy thing because June Street in particular is like, how far do you have to go to park? Like 50 feet?
Yeah.
Like except all the way down at Chandler. It's really never congested.
And where we are too, what's interesting, and I was using my own house as an example, is because our houses are so old in that neighborhood that the property lines are weird, right? So like,
Are we coming back in about a minute?
on paper,
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
look
that
at,
includes a little bit of the bump here. So about 30, 40 seconds.
on paper, if you look at our property lines, like this is just going to the city stuff. That's like the grid lines get kind of weird. Like I actually own a little bit of my neighbor's driveway because the property lines are so antiquated that they come in on funny angles. And then, at least in theory, the neighbor that I share my driveway with owns the majority of my driveway. So I'm like, well, again, that's one of those things that, you know, a surveyor comes in and sticks to the letter when we go to sell. It's just gonna be a nightmare.
Right. All right.
Everyone loves him. He's all alone in the world. His mother and father weighed several hundred pounds, but little Ernie was born to be a mini pig. No bigger than the palm of your hand, no larger than a telephone. Born to go through his entire life as a mini pig. Yes, the smallest pig in all the world, and he is here right now. Come in and see him now. Just 1 pound of bacon on the hoof, alive and here now. On 508, a show about Worcester. I'm Michael Benedetti. This is Brendan Melligan.
Yeah, there we go.
And this is Chris Robarge.
I have the sneaking suspicion that I just got analogied with a mini pig.
If you want to identify as Ernie the Mini Pig, you can, because unfortunately, listeners, Ernie the Mini Pig's not actually on the show today. That was false advertising.
I got pulled in as a backup.
That's right. That's right. We couldn't get the pig, but we could get you,
Couldn't
man.
get the pig. Had to settle for me.
So that's the, we just dealt with the council agenda. I think we just put Gary Rosen in his place too in the last segment, so I feel good about that. Would you guys rather talk? Do we want to start interviewing Chris about what makes Chris Robarge tick, or do we want to talk about pedestrian traffic fatalities?
You know, why don't you go right into pedestrian traffic fatalities?
All right. So,
This sounds happy.
So this is good. This is a report from the Governor's Highway Safety Association called Pedestrian Traffic Fatalities by State 2017 Preliminary Data. It says, in recent years, the number of pedestrian fatalities in the United States has grown substantially faster than all other traffic deaths. The number of pedestrian fatalities increased 20% from 2007 to 2016, while at the same time, all other traffic deaths decreased by 14%. Pedestrian deaths as a proportion of total motor vehicle crash deaths increased steadily from 11% in 2007 to 16% in 2016. Pedestrians now account for a larger proportion of traffic fatalities than they have in the past 33 years. And the funny thing is, some states had pedestrian deaths go down, and some states had pedestrian deaths go up. Massachusetts is one of the ones that had it go up. They say, without making a direct correlation or claiming a definitive link, more recent factors contributing to the increase in pedestrian fatalities might include the growing number of state and local governments that have decriminalized the recreational use of marijuana,
Of course, that's going to be the issue.
which can impair judgment and reaction time for all road users, and increasing use of smartphones, which can be a significant source of distraction regardless of travel mode. The 7 states, including our own, and DC, that legalized recreational marijuana use between 2012 and 2016 reported a collective 16.4% increase in pedestrian fatalities for the first 6 months of 2017 versus the first 6 months of 2016. That's 16% increase from 2016 to 2017. Whereas all other states reported a collective 5.8% decrease in pedestrian fatalities over that time. And with regard to cell phone use, they also find some correlation between increasing ownership of smartphones and increasing pedestrian fatalities.
So here's the question, Mike.
Yes, Brendan.
When they jump to the weed conclusion, are they saying it's because there are too many drivers smoking weed, or because there's too many pedestrians smoking
They
weed?
say explicitly everybody's stoned.
Everybody
Everybody is stoned. That's the basis of their theory. The same thing with smartphones, that they don't say, oh, the pedestrian would just put down his smartphone and stop texting while he's walking through the crosswalk. They say everybody's more distracted, pedestrians, drivers, everybody.
I can see some of that on the distracted side. I think it's a different color weed, but
I mean, it's a substantial difference. Now, the one the suggestions that they have are basically they're basically along the lines of we need to do what you could call a more European model. We need to have smaller streets. We need to have more streets with bike lanes. We need to have more complicated streets with fewer distractions, but maybe. Actually the complete streets model is something that they cite as being something that decreases pedestrian deaths. And I think that progressives too often say, oh, we should just do what Europe does. And I want to acknowledge that, as European Americans, I think our ancestors made 100% the right call to get out of that hellhole and come over here. So let's not do what Europe does. But, 40 years ago, we had way lower pedestrian deaths than they did in Europe.
And everyone just died in cars.
But they've gotten like way better over the last 40 years, and we've stayed the same over the last 40 years. So as of about 10 or 15 years ago, Europe got better at it than us. So we just need to reclaim our old mantle for having the best street safety that we used to have a generation ago, and say we can have the best street safety again today.
But that's what I was thinking while you were talking. You know, a lot has changed in the last couple decades in regards to the relationship between pedestrians and drivers, right? Like, you almost have like this bifurcation in society where you've got like a huge population that wants to start moving back to bicycles, walking, just as modes of transportation in the city. You've got a lot of folks that like just reject that wholesale. At the same time, you've got more cars on the road than we ever had. It only kind of stands to reason that if you're going to have more people walking about and you're going to have more cars on the road, that number of times that those two things collide is going to unfortunately keep rising.
Yeah.
I mean, you could make the same argument too, that, you go back 30, 40 years when driving was probably the most dangerous activity Americans could participate in, because things like the Ford Pinto existed, where if you threw a baseball at the rear bumper, it was going to burst into flames, right? And there were no seatbelts or anything, and people died all the time in cars. So we figured out that relationship between human beings inside their giant 1,000-pound metal boxes. Now we're going to go in the other direction. Say, okay, now we get all these people in the metal boxes. What do we do for the folks on the outside?
I mean, I think we should keep everybody safe. That's my opinion. I know you disagree with that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we put
want people to die
spikes and knives on the front of cars and just make it quicker.
Mad Max Fury Road, man, great movie. One thing I'll say now, the silver lining to this is that Massachusetts is still the 11th safest state.
Yeah.
So like we're doing great.
But that's kind of my point though, is that even we see this on a regular basis in Worcester. I can't remember a time where you saw so many pedestrian fatalities here in the city of Worcester. It seems like it's at least a weekly occurrence.
No, I tell you, I don't know if this is just because things like Mass Live and the TNG local RSS feed make it so that I can follow this stuff on an ongoing basis. But like, it's like every day some pedestrian is hit. Yeah. It seems like every week somebody is killed by a car walking around the town. And maybe 70 years ago the number was way, way higher, and that we're just being crazy to worry about this. But yeah, it is something which happens all the time. It is,
but I don't remember it always being the case that was such a regular occurrence. And it seems that it's something that's come onto the city council's radar as of late, because a lot of emphasis has been putting on to reconfiguring crosswalks, making sure that they're painted.
Yes.
So it would indicate that there does seem to be something on the rise. But at the same time, I mean, geez, as both a pedestrian and a driver, I've thankfully never made that contact, but I've had near misses, and it's. Oftentimes it's because people don't know how to use cross. And you and I have talked about this.
Well, everybody is crazy. Everybody is. I mean, this does play into my working theory that everybody driving and walking in Worcester is high all the time. One thing I'll say is that they look at things like these more complicated crosswalks and whatever, and they say that the flags and flashing lights, and they say this is really just a Band-Aid. That like the real permanent, significant solutions are things like totally reconfiguring the way your crosswalks work, et cetera, et cetera. We got to go to a commercial break. So after these important messages, we will come back and talk to Chris Robarge on 508, a show about Worcester.
Yeah, that's a weird one, man, because I don't know. Anytime that I've never had a near miss with a pedestrian in as a driver, or even as a pedestrian with a car in a crosswalk. It always is like, you'll be around one of the colleges or whatnot, where somebody that's like 4'2" decides, like, without looking, just to dart out from between like two box trucks that like completely encase them, and then be surprised when there's a car right in front of me. And, but like whenever I read stuff, Lincoln Street seems to be one that, again, as a driver coming down from like the Burncoat side of things, you get that big.
Lincoln Street is a death trap. That's the street where everybody's always getting hit by cars.
But it's also one of those places that, as a driver, also Chandler, that like people don't use crosswalks. They just like meander diagonally across the street and don't make eye contact or whatnot. Like there are basic rules about being a pedestrian that I know you disagree. Pedestrians have the right of way on everything, and you're militant.
They have the right of way for whatever that is worth.
Yeah, but I mean, that only gets you so far until you're impaled on
the right of way is taken, not given.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things that in a city like Worcester, you get multiple problems. In a city like Worcester, you've got like weird behavior issues that like people don't seem to understand, that like, these rules aren't about trying to limit your right as to what part of the street you can walk in. It's, we genuinely just don't want you to die. And when you get hit by a car, that's probably going to be the thing that happens. And on the flip side, you get places like Boston that are now have huge influxes of people who are coming in by commuter rail or parking in surface lots and then walking a couple miles to work or whatnot.
Right.
And the level of pedestrians is something that's almost never been seen outside of the neighborhood level. It's crossing the entire city every day. So I stand to reason that you're going to lose a few along the way in a tragic way because of numbers increasing on both sides.
People make mistakes. Yeah.
Not that I would advocate for.
Are we ready to come back?
Yep, I mean, anytime.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna come back and then we'll talk to you. This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eye, and dark within. This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eye, and dark within. And this is Chris Robarge. And this is Brendan Melican, and I am Michael Benedetti, and this is 508, the show about Worcester. Chris Robarge, how are you doing?
I am doing even better than when you asked me at the beginning of the show.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
That is reassuring. I'm always worried that we make people worse.
No, I'm feeling better. I think I'm going to be, probably
Like
2 or 3
therapeutic
notches up
way,
by
or?
the time. Yeah.
Cool.
Have to
Crystal,
talk about pedestrian deaths, lots of good stuff. Just one thing I would point out, not that I would advocate for necessarily having higher jaywalking fines, but do you know what the jaywalking fine in Massachusetts is?
It's $1.
It's $1.
Yeah.
$2 for second and subsequent offense.
Yeah, no,
I'm glad it goes up.
It does. It
That's
does.
a huge increase just from a percentage.
It's 100%.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100% there. Mike, and I think we did a show on this one. This is one of the first times I realized how militant Mike can be when it comes to the freedom inherent on pedestrians. But yeah, it's absolutely absurd. I mean, that's one of those things that, like jaywalking, West Coast, like San Diego, California.
Yeah.
That could be like a crippling fine for jaywalking. But it's also like they take driving really serious out there too, because you've got 4-way, 4-lane courtesy stops that it would terrify anybody that thinks Kelly Square is a tough neighborhood to drive through, right? I mean, like. They take driving much more seriously. It's much more structured, and then on the flip side, pedestrians are expected to respect that sort of ecosystem as well.
It's a very, very different environment out there for sure.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to ask you about the ACLU first of all.
Sure.
How are things going with the ACLU in our local area?
Things are going well. As per usual, we're very busy.
And what do you all? I feel like every once in a while I hear about the ACLU suing the city or whatever. But between then, it seems like many years can pass.
Mm-hmm. So we do, especially over the last several years, have some additional functions to just being a litigation and lobby firm, pretty much exclusively, which is kind of the history of the ACLU. Doing law reform through lawsuits and doing law reform through law change. We have a lot of different arms now, one of which is a field and public advocacy arm, which happens to be what I am primarily attached to. So we're kind of working on a lot of different things. Locally, we've been trying to respond to the influx of volunteers, opportunities, and requests that we had last year. So I've been working with folks who have wanted to come forward and help us out. We've been doing a lot of trainings. Training people to know better how to lobby their state and local representatives, and know your rights trainings, media trainings, talking to people about how to interact with the press, how to sort of get your point across. We are also going to be looking at doing some work potentially on a city ordinance. That's kind of forthcoming.
Can you talk about this?
Yeah, no, I can. We are starting to do some organizing around a city level ordinance called CCOPS. And has yet to be introduced, but we're sort of pulling together some strategy and getting some folks together who are ready to work on this. What CCOPS does, CCOPS is community control over police spending. And what CCOPS aims to do is to put some put some protocol in place essentially so that policing equipment, particularly surveillance and sort of paramilitary equipment, which have become increasing concerns for us and I think for a lot of the public, that there's some structure and some protocol around how those things are implemented. So right now, if the police decide that they want, say,
A tank.
a tank, they can apply to a military surplus program that had been shut down by Obama but has been reinstituted by President Trump, and they can get one. If they decide that they wanted to put 100 cameras at every intersection or in all of our schools.
In the dog parks.
In the dog parks. If they decided they want to put cameras in the dog parks, they could apply to the Department of Justice for a technology grant and say, we want to surveil our dog parks. We want to really know what's going on there. We want it fed into the police station in real time. They apply for the grant. Let's presume they are awarded the grant. Now they have the money, they buy the stuff, and they're off to the races. What we're looking to do is add a few steps in that process. One of those steps would be some level of structure and protocol getting set up. How do you intend to use this equipment? What are the parameters in which the data will be available and to whom? How long will you be keeping the data? We want there to be some analysis of, potential privacy and surveillance pitfalls, and ultimately for there to be at least a public hearing in front of City Council where people can come and speak for or against the proposal, and for there actually to be a City Council vote. So that's essentially what CCOPS does, as well as trying to, again, close the loophole a little bit on these military surplus purchases.
Brendan.
Like,
So currently, the
that was a little more thorough than anything that you and I were doing on the show, Mike. So yeah, we can just wrap it up and go home.
I was just gonna say currently the procedure is that they would apply for the federal grant, and then at some point the council will vote in favor of accepting the grant, and then it will happen.
To my knowledge, or my understanding, I don't know that council. I guess council does take a technical vote on saying, there's a grant money. Let's vote to take it. But,
Right.
but practically, it's not something that's discussed. I don't know of a situation in which we've ever said, no, you can't have that grant that you were awarded, and you can't spend that money. So we have some surveillance equipment in Worcester already, and we have quite a bit actually. We have a number of cameras that are mounted to traffic poles. There are cameras within all of the city public housing. There's cameras in some of the schools. We have a shot spotter system that helps to triangulate gunshots. We have at least 4 automatic license plate readers that are stationarily mounted in places in the city. Every time you drive by one, it reads your license plate and it creates a timestamp. It says, this vehicle with this registered driver was in this place at this time. That program, for example, there were some questions once it was implemented after the fact, saying, well, what do you plan to use this for? Are you going to use this for traffic citations? They said, no, we're not going to use it for that. Are you going to use it for this? And said, no, we're not going to use it for that. We don't really have an answer from the city or the police department as to what they intend to use this equipment for. We don't know how long they keep the data, so I presume it's as long as they can.
Right.
We don't know who can access the data, so I presume it's anyone in the police department. We don't know what protocol there is for a standard by which they would have to reach to be able to access that data, so I presume it's whenever they feel like it. We don't really know, and that's kind of what we're looking to avoid and to correct with something like a CCOPS ordinance.
In the past it's just sort of been like, hey, we want to get some cameras. Is it going to be invasive to people's privacy? No. Okay, buy our cameras. And this would require the police to actually say, okay, here's what this really is. Here's what happens with the data. Here's the scenario around this. What do you think?
Yes, and it provides also an avenue for public input, which we also don't currently have. We never, at no point in our current process of acquiring police surveillance equipment or paramilitary, military surplus equipment, do we ever say to the people of Worcester, hey, do you want this? Do you know what the pros and the cons are? Do you think the pros outweigh the cons, or do you think that maybe we should reconsider this? We don't ever have that process. This at least creates a sort of minimal structure by which to have that process. There would at least have to be a city council public meeting in which these sorts of purchases would be discussed.
And the cool thing about that, is that includes in that conversation too, like, because you're talking about citizens of Worcester, also a lot of cops too, right? Like,
Yep.
there's probably a good case to be made that, like, if a grant comes up that you could buy the hypothetical tank, that, like, there's probably a lot of police officers who would say, maybe that's not a great use of money. Maybe we could go in for some comfy shoes or something that might be a little bit more practical day to day. And I think in a lot of these conversations, oftentimes that's part of the conversation that's overlooked as well too. That you end up with like bureaucratic sort of management decisions that seem to make sense because, hey, free money, don't want to pass that up. Meanwhile, there might be better sources of funding to chase down that can be more relevant even from the employee perspective in those universities who, at the end of the day, we like to think are just trying to do a good job.
Yeah, there's also a lot of these grants that are pretty sort of widely applicable. There's been a few Department of Justice grants, at least one of which was essentially for any technology use that the police department wanted to propose. And so I hope that, that if we, are able to move forward in this process and eventually get an ordinance introduced and passed, that one of the conversations we can have is how do we want to use this money? Let's not leave this money on the table,
right.
But do we want to use it to buy this kind of thing that has these sorts of, pros and cons, or this other thing?
Yeah.
That maybe is more in line with what citizens and potentially rank and file officers actually would want and need.
Very cool.
I want to shift gears for a moment. The last time I think you were on 508 was maybe when you were talking about being on the Citizens Advisory Council and you were talking about boards and commissions and all that stuff.
And we were sharpening knives.
And
you were sharpening.
I was sharpening knives, but unsuccessfully. And then I feel like previous to you being the I think this is, if I get the chronology right, previous to you being the ACLU guy, the big public Chris Robarge thing was whenever you resigned from the Citizens Advisory Council.
That was
right?
while I was.
That was
while I have had this job. Yeah,
so
that was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
All right, and so you were on this, which is sort of the board of boards, the commission of commissions, and then you had resigned from this because the city hired a new city manager, and the process seemed sort of lackluster, bad, corrupt. I don't know which word you would use to describe that process, but you publicly resigned and you were like, I'm not going to be part of all of this.
Yeah, I would say the process was something along the lines of non-existent, or somewhere between non-existent and very farcical. I guess we did technically have a process. We did technically interview outside candidates. But yeah, that was what happened, and that's the reason that I resigned from the Citizen Advisory Council. And my reasoning sort of behind that is, and I explained this to the city manager, who was nice enough to call me in for a meeting afterwards, after I resigned to talk. It really has nothing to do with the specific choice that we made for city manager, but when being a representative of a public body that is specifically empowered and given the responsibility to go out and recruit people and sort of bring them into the city government fold, and it requires you to have a faith in the integrity of your city government, and it requires you to convince people who might not have that they should have it. That this is a real thing, that these boards and commissions really matter, that there's a process, that your voice could be heard, that you're going to be a part of this amazing public volunteer process. And in light of the way that all went down, I wasn't feeling it anymore.
Right, because that was the kind of thing where if you had an opinion and you needed your voice to be heard, it was like, your voice is not going to be heard. Ed Augustus is going to be the city. Ed Augustus, he's a buddy of people on the city council. He's been involved with Democratic politics a long time. He's going to be the city manager. Don't worry about it. We'll have some meetings and whatever. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That was kind of that process.
Yeah. I mean, that was the process, and we had some good candidates come in. I got to meet, I think, all of those candidates when they came in for their public meeting, and And in the end, we decided to step completely outside of that process that we paid a fair bit of money to undertake, by the way. And we decided to appoint someone who'd specifically said that he wasn't going to take the position. And again, the merits of that specific person aside, the process really was awful, and it didn't leave me in a position where I felt like I could be an advocate for city government at large.
How do you feel about how the city manager has done in the years since then?
I think it's complicated. I'm interested in what you guys also think, but I feel like it's kind of been a mixed bag, honestly. I was hopeful that there would be sort of more of a tonal change in the way that things were done. I don't really know why. I mean, I guess it's part of why I was upset with the process, and part of why, frankly, I wish we had more seriously considered an outside candidate. I think that Ed is a good guy, and I think that he is really trying to do a good job in Worcester, and I think on a lot of fronts he's done that. But I look at the interplay between him and council and some other entities in the city, and I realize that I think ultimately this is something I hope council will think about, because I know it can be easier or feel better to bring in an inside guy, a Worcester guy. But I think there really is a merit to considering someone from outside the city who isn't beholden and doesn't have this history, because I think whether intentions are good or not, that does all wind up factoring in how things go down. And I think we could have a better, more transparent city government if we had done things differently.
Brenda, did you have any feedback on that?
I
I know you would interrupt me if you did. I don't know why I keep asking you if you have any feedback.
I was solid.
Are we ready to go to a commercial break?
I think Hank is eager to go to a break. I think we take us out.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to one more commercial. Please don't go away. We'll be right back on 508, a show about Worcester.
I was so distracted hearing that. So I remember the first time my grandparents went on a cruise, and my grandfather came back from that cruise with one of these pens where the little ship goes back and forth. You ever have one of these, Mike?
Yeah.
And for the last 15 minutes, I've been a 5-year-old again, sitting at my grandparents' house, just watching this pen go back and forth.
That's a pretty great pen. Where did you get that pen, Brenda?
I found it over here.
Table, I think.
There's a very nice collection of pens over here. There's a Sharpie pen. There's a breast cancer pen. We've got this Carnival Cruise pen.
Is there something we should definitely talk about in our final segment?
I don't think so. No. We should talk about Red Man and Meth and Myth. Boston Park Plaza pen.
They're going to be at the Palladium.
They are April 6th. Last time we had I think this is the last time we had Method Man in town was as a part of the Wu-Tang Clan, and they
don't burn this topic right now.
Well, we can start this conversation with our online friends, and then finish the conversation with our radio friends.
There you go, all of our many friends.
Lots of friends, Mike. Did you get your tickets for that trip, Mike?
Did Mike?
Yeah.
For Method Man?
Method Man Rebel?
No.
No?
No.
No, I don't care. I'm excited that the Feds are taking that Wu-Tang album from...
Is today the day that, the Scarelli thing. Is today Juggalo Day?
I don't know.
God, we're slacking. We're the only people in the city that should have this.
I never have.
I count on you guys for my local Juggalo information.
I think today is the day that ICP is in town.
I don't understand any of this stuff. Are we coming back in now?
We are.
All right.
There we are.
Thrill of a lifetime. Get your tickets and come in. Killers of the Amazon can devour a cow in a matter of seconds, can leave nothing but the bare bones. First time shown in your city, and you may never have the chance to see it again. Alive, 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 the deadly piranhas. $10,000 reward, if not absolutely alive. Never before shown, and you may never again have the chance to see it again. The most terrifying flesh eaters from the deep. Chris Robarge, Brendan Melican, and myself, Michael Benedetti, on the 508 radio show.
You know, Mike, I'm feeling a lot less good about Edgar the mini pig. You could go right into this.
Whatever happened to Edgar? Why are you talking?
We were all so excited about him, and then he's gone missing, and suddenly there's all these piranhas that are flourishing.
Yeah, this is chronological. This is terrifying.
I really, I've kind of been thinking about them. I mean, like the piranhas, I obviously think about the piranhas all the time, but today I've been thinking a lot about the mini pigs. Like, hey there, people in middle America, we have a small pig. Pay some money to look at a small pig. Like, I don't know how that works.
You know what's kind of, the last couple weeks you've been doing these carnival barker routines, it's the thing I keep thinking about is that, we're mostly like a Back to the Future generation for as moviegoers here, and like, it's kind of cool to think like, well, what would somebody in the 50s think about somebody from the 80s showing up and all the crazy, wacky language and clothing and whatnot. Well, how would somebody, where carnivals and carnival barkers were like all the rage, like how would they feel about coming into the future and realizing you could just go to Petco and buy a piranha?
You were talking about this last time.
I mean, like, there's mini pigs everywhere. And, like, who doesn't have a mini pig? We don't even want to talk about mini pig.
I don't even know if we have mini pigs. Where would you buy a really tiny pig in Worcester? Like
Probably Craigslist.
Like an unhealthily small pig.
Basically an unhealthy pig. I wouldn't
I
want
think
an unhealthy pig.
it sounds like it's the size of a telephone or your hand.
That is how you start a zombie outbreak.
Weren't telephones big? I don't know. You want to talk about Method Man, Brendan?
Well, but we have Chris up here, and I think as long as we've known each other, I mean, that's, we've always kind of had this music, right? And in the last couple of weeks, you and I, Mike, and some of our guests have been talking about a lot that's been going on in the city in terms of changes down at the Palladium, culture, and life in general in the city. And Chris and I both have tickets for Redman and Method Man on April 6th, right? We should be excited about that. Do we think that they're actually going to take the stage?
I hope so.
Because the last time that Wu-Tang was in town, they didn't take the stage. They left the promoters with, I think it was like a $30,000 bill for the hotel room at the old Crown Plaza.
None of Wu-Tang took the stage?
Never shut up. They never shut up. They completely, they went like
they just spaced on it.
They went old school, like we're gonna party and destroy the hotel room, and they destroyed every ounce of the hotel room, never hit the stage, and then just left the city. And apparently, remember we were talking earlier, like, how crazy is this that you have to put in a rider for a construction contract? You actually have to obey the law. Like apparently, when you're a young kind of fresh promoter trying to bring someone big to the city, you also have to put it in a rider saying like, yeah, you're actually going to come and get on stage.
Go to the venue.
Don't just make that assumption, because then you end up having to pay for both the hotel room that they destroyed, as well as having to cover the losses for the venue that you booked for the night and didn't actually get any money for. I hope they take this.
I hope for Woodley Shakes that works out okay.
I'm taking my 13-year-old son to that show as well, because I think that's an important life lesson to realize that you can get all amped up to see Method Man and Redman. Like, this will be the one time in your life maybe you're going to see Rock Wilder live, but they might not even come up. So we'll just stand here patiently, and this might be either the greatest moment of your life or the greatest disappointment you've ever experienced.
I feel like Meth and Red have grown up a fair bit, and so I'm hopeful that we're going to see.
Those guys are what, in their 60s now?
75.
Probably close.
No, actually, speaking of Herbie Hancock, he's working a new album with Kendrick Lamar.
And a bunch of other people, yeah. Some really amazing.
Go ahead, have your show, guys. No, I'm okay. I'm totally okay with this. Do it.
I think pick up the phone. I think Gary's waiting to talk to you.
Is there seriously a phone call?
No.
Thank God. Okay. How are you feeling about acts coming through Worcester these days?
I think it's great. I think it's one of the best things that's happening in the city right now, and there's quite a number of things happening in the city right now. So that's saying something. I don't know who they have brought in as a show booker over at the Palladium. I probably should know.
We know. What's the?
We're not done. No. We actually had Tony Scavone, who's assisting in that role, up here three or 4 weeks ago. And they're excited about it too. It seems like that's the really cool thing. It's not just like there are people in the city, music fans, who are excited about what's happening. The venue actually seems to be sharing that excitement as well.
Did you know that they replaced the boards on the stage with boards from Madison Square Garden? Is it Madison Square Garden?
Yeah,
Madison Square Garden.
The stage itself is made of the old basketball court from Madison Square Garden.
No kidding.
Yeah, somehow they managed to find the wood from Madison Square Garden from the parquet, and that's what the stage is made of.
I think for that I could forgive one of the few things that they've done that I was really upset about, which was taking down the EM Lowe's sign. That made me pretty sad.
But did you see the new? So we've all seen the LED sign that went up there. Did you see the addition they just threw on in the last couple of weeks? So now there's a Palladium sign that's very similar to the old EMLO sign on the front.
yeah,
It's like
on the front,
facade
yeah,
of
yep.
the LED sign. So it used to be like the side, if you're coming down the street, you see the big
Right.
LED. Now they've got this really slick, old school sign that says Palladium, like plugged into that. So it just looks fantastic.
Well, I'll say one thing not related to music on this front, which
Yes.
is shout out to our demolition delay ordinance for the fact that we even still have a Worcester Palladium,
Yeah.
because that was very much a question not very long ago, what, several years ago, 5-6 years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah,
No,
the
totally.
idea of just tearing it down.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember Bruce, the Snow Ghost Russell, was very upset at this idea.
Which says a lot, because Bruce's solution to most problems is
Is to burn it down.
Tear-
This is the one part of the city that he was like, you can't destroy the
Waiting everything around
You can't
it.
destroy metal. You can't destroy the metal soul of the city of the Worcester.
I'm glad Bruce got his wish.
Worcester is supposed to be a surface lot for the Palladium. That's the way it's supposed to be. You keep the Palladium,
Burn everything else down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you guys have a show coming up that you're excited
You
about.
can come.
I've still sort of been waiting for that show to come to the Palladium. That's going to be the one that gets me back down there again. And it hasn't happened. I think I've done.
What is that show?
I don't know.
I don't know what I'm supposed
I
to keep
feel
my
like
eyes open.
the only reason I ever used to go was for the Metal and Hardcore Festival, which I don't care about that much anymore. I think it was the Metal. It's coming up again soon, I guess. The Metal and Hardcore Festival, and then Motorhead, who are all dead or whatever, and are not going to come back. So now I'm like, I mean, who would I go to the Palladium to see? I don't know. I'm becoming an old man who doesn't care about new
Insane
music.
Clown Posse?
Led Zeppelin, the original Led Zeppelin, I would definitely see. Not
that old.
the Insane Clown Posse. I
Judas
love
Priest,
Zeppelin.
I think they're there like next week, although I think
I
that's
love
sold
Zeppelin
out.
too, but you're making it sound like that's the music I grew up with, in the sense
It is
that
the
like
music I grew up
But like not in the sense that it was just like new and coming out. It was-
Yeah, Zeppelin and
You
Motorhead.
borrowed that one.
I don't know. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Stay strong. Keep the ACLUing, man. This
Right
is
on.
it's been
Likewise.
an exciting era to be involved with that group.
It definitely is. It feels like a very particularly special moment in time. So yeah, I appreciate it, and you guys keep doing you.
Well, and people at home keep doing Worcester. Gary Rosen, I know you're listening to this. I know you've been restraining yourself from making a phone call because you don't want to swear on the radio, and I appreciate that. Everybody, we will be back next week from a basement on Main Street. This has been 508, a show about Worcester.